Good evening. This is the Go Rhody podcast. We're going to be doing the Rhody Men's Hoops season preview for the 24-25 season. How are you, Abu?
Doing well. Thank you.
Let's talk about what happened last year. I was definitely off. I was very optimistic. You were a little less optimistic than me, but we both were. A lot of other people were. What do you think was the problem with the team? It's very hard to predict, isn't it?
Well, it's easy for us to look back. I mean, it's very clear some of the problems, the difficulties that this Rams team had last season. Archie has talked about it numerous times since last season, in this preseason thus far, and during the course of the season last year. 2 years ago, the team really struggled offensively. Only scoring about 66 points a game and giving up about 5 points per game more. And so they had that, not very good record of 9-22 overall. Last year was a little bit better at 12-20. And where they struggled primarily was on the defensive end. They scored, and teams had a difficult time, containing them. But they really had difficulty containing their opponents. And so they were about 4 points. It was about a 4-point difference between how much they scored and how much the other team was able to put up on the board. So clearly it was a defensive problem. They had trouble defending the perimeter, way too many guys being able to penetrate in the paint. And they really didn't have much of a rim protection back there to help them out. With the guards, really not being able to contain as well as they should have. So that was the primary problem. Also, it's difficult to sustain anything when you have a brand new group of guys that are coming in. You just don't know how they're going to gel. So after that first year, we had another group of guys come in. And fortunately for Rhode Island, they do have a core group, experienced group that played quite a bit last season, and they're back as their core group this year, and they have some seasoned veterans coming in as transfers. So I'm a little bit more optimistic than maybe I was at this time last season.
I think we think alike. I call them the 4-4. I think at least two of these players, Fuchs and Cam Estevez, could have breakout seasons, and then you have the transfers and David Green also, he could become a dominant player. A lot of people thought Chris Desano was saying maybe he could have been a third team on the preseason instead of Jaden House. So I was thinking this.
I would have to. I'm sorry to interrupt. I would have to agree. I would have to agree with that. I was a little surprised with Jaden House. I mean, he's an excellent performer, and certainly, with that team getting better, probably deserved the accolade. But I also thought that David Green, even with him coming in and playing, almost half the season, maybe a little bit more than half the season, I thought he was very impressive over the year. Wound up, becoming URI's leading scorer over the course of the season, and a great 3-point shooter last season. So, they both could deserve it. But we'll see what happens this season. You never know; they might get two guys. Well,
that's right. Well, let's go to a videotape of Archie, and he had an interview with Andy Katz, and he did a really good thing. We're going to break it down and see what they said, but they revealed a lot in this interview, and I think it sets the stage for this season.
All right, Archie, year 3, preseason A-10 predictions. No way is this team finishing 11th. Where is your level of optimism for this group?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm very excited about this team. We've been together for a lot longer than previous 2 seasons, and we also have, for the first time, a core group returning with an influx of people that are coming in with some experience. So it's a group that we've been able to mesh. I like our chemistry so far. I think we have the right pieces in terms of leadership, especially at the guard position. And overall, depth-wise, I feel like we're playing a really good player every time that we make a substitution and whatnot as well. So I like where we're at in terms of chemistry. I like where we're at in terms of depth. And I also think that from a leadership perspective, we have the right guys driving the bus.
So
I'd like to stop here. I like the way Andy just started and he didn't beat around the bush and said, there's no way we should be 11th. And I think everyone is going to be very embarrassed who voted. The coaches are the ones who do that voting. And I've seen some other rankings as high as 6th and 106th in the nation. And it only gets better when you get a great game from Javonte. I had no idea that he has the potential to be a star center in the Atlantic 10. And if he could do this against Connecticut, imagine what he could do with so I thought that was great the way Andy and also the way Archie talks about the team. It really is true. It's the chemistry, and they also are a deep team, and they really don't have any weaknesses at any position. What else you feel about this team that we should be excited about besides the depth and the chemistry?
Well, they were able to really begin to create some of that chemistry this summer and took that trip to Bahar in the Bahamas. And we saw Javonte Brown's potential there, where he scored somewhere 16 points a game, 7 rebounds a game. I mean, he really played, particularly well. And then he showed what he could do playing against UConn, where he had 16 points, 10 rebounds, I believe. And 6 of those rebounds were offensive rebounds. And that's an area where URI may have struggled last season. So I'm not sure. You never say never, or one thing can definitely happen over the course of the season. 11th seems like a low rating, but I thought it was a low rating for them last season, and they didn't perform very well. You just never know how guys are going to come together. But the thing that Archie mentioned is extremely important is the fact that you've got a returning core of players, and you also bringing in some transfers who have some experience and have some talent. And they got it across the board. They're bringing in guards. They've got a couple of wing players who are going to really, really help this team over the course of the year. And they got Javonte Brown in the middle, who looks like he can score, rebound, and do some rim protection inside. So I think they'll be better than 11, but you just never know. But you look at Loyola, Chicago last year.
Yeah.
2 years ago, they finished in the bottom 4 along with URI.
And Florida the same.
And they ascended to the top of the league last season. So I certainly know that Archie is probably hoping for that kind of turnaround.
Yeah, and also I think he has a pretty good motor, Javonte, too. He's quick.
Oh yeah, I mean he made one play that really raised my eyebrows at that game against UConn. He literally ran down a guard as they were going on a fast break, came from behind, got his hand on the ball, and created a turnover. So yeah, he's got a high motor. Obviously, his length is going to be a great advantage. And the one thing also that I think is going to help URI, I noticed that David Fuchs was working a great deal in the offseason on his perimeter shot. And he took one shot from the top of the key, knocked that down. And I know Archie likes to play a high-low post offense sometimes. And so he's got a perfect duo to be able to do that. Fuchs, particularly if he's able to take that mid-range to top of the key jump shot to keep defenses honest, and Javonte Brown, who has that length, they did it a number of times against UConn, where they would get the ball inside the Javonte, and he was able to score.
I saw Fuchs last year, and he had some nice shots, and I feel like he had potential last year. And at the 3, he made a lot of great shots. He certainly missed them, but when he made them, his form was very good. He didn't hit the rim. The ball went right through. So I wouldn't be surprised if he could get in the 30s. And if he does that, then that opens up everything else for the Rams, because they already have the perimeter game.
I'm a Big Ten head coach. I do a lot of Big Ten. I watched Jamarcus Lawrence at Nebraska.
Yeah.
Saw his toughness, his leadership. You pair him with Jaden House. What about that backcourt?
I think, adding in Sebastian Thomas as well is probably even more unsung in terms of what's actually coming with that combination of guard play. Jamarcus is fantastic in terms of shooting the ball. He has a great mind and IQ. He really understands how to play You're looking at a guy that's competed on the road in the Big Ten defensively at the guard spot. So he's bringing a wealth of experience and some toughness to him. Jaden being a returner, now it's a lot easier for him. He's not going through it the first time, but he's a naturally gifted scorer, and I think that's where Sebastian puts all this thing together. When you have a great point guard and a guy that the coaching staff looks and can really trust in terms of handling the ball, making decisions, the game gets really easy for a guy like Jaden. It can get really easy for a guy like Jamarcus because that guy does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of playmaking. And I think that Sebastian, more so than even any other guy on our team, has a real heavy responsibility in that.
Yeah, we can see it in practice.
Yeah.
I mean, the leadership from him, definitely, you could see an extension of you, obviously, at that position. All right, up front, Javonte Brown, I mean, he is big. He is a large human being, rim protector, can finish on the oops.
He's different. You know, he's
coming over from Western Michigan, what are your thoughts there?
He's different. What he has, you can't teach. I mean, he's true 7 foot, 7'1", tremendous length. And at this stage of his career, he really understands the nuances of a big guy. He's a true big guy. And the other team's going to have to deal with him and prepare for him. And I think he's going to make a lot of guys around him better because of the attention. But in terms of him, his durability and the amount of minutes that he can handle, you know, to me, this is where that's the balance of him going from really being 15, 12 minutes a game to now can we get him to 24? Can we get him to 25? And I think that'll be a big question mark as we keep going, playing through different lineups and foul trouble. But he's a big part of what we're doing, and we need him on the floor.
Summer trip, this group needed that. I mean, you guys get together so early now, but to take that trip to the Caribbean, how much did that help?
It was a lot of fun. I think more so than anything, even if we didn't play basketball, it was well worth the trip to spend, you know, every moment of every day at a beautiful resort like Baha Mar. You spend mornings, noons, and afternoons together. That's where the bond sort of happens. And I think for us to be able to put this group together and take that trip, adding in the basketball.
Well, I think that's enough there. But the other points he made for J-Law, I think he's going to be a great player. And unfortunately, in the Connecticut game, he had to play point guard. And I knew that all along that that's just not the position he wants to be in. So that was another good point that he made. And but when Sebastian is in the game, they'll look like a lot different type of team. And Jamarcus is going to be a great player. What's your read on Jamarcus from what you've heard and saw?
Well, I've seen some tape of him from Nebraska. He's a tough player. He can make shots, particularly when the offense comes back around to him and he's set. So he's going to benefit, and House is going to benefit, and David Green is going to benefit. And of course, Javonte Brown is going to benefit because Sebastian Thomas is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. Lewis Courtright was pressed into service as URI's point guard last year. Maybe not the most natural position for him, but this is a natural position for Sebastian Thomas. And, you know, Courtright was the leading assist guy for URI last season by a large margin. I think he had over 170 assists on the season. Well, Sebastian Thomas not only scored just under 20 points per game, but he had over 150 assists as well. So he's going to control that offense. And one way you know how important that Sebastian Thomas can be, URI was down only 44-40 against UConn at halftime. They lost that game by 25.
Wow.
And the reason why they did primarily in the second half was that they lost continuity. They couldn't make shots. Of course, the defense was a problem as well. They couldn't make shots. They really didn't have anybody to get them back into rhythm and run the team. Cam Estevez will play at the point from time to time. I mean, you'll see Jamarcus Lawrence out there, but they need a true point guard. And I think Sebastian Thomas, with his experience now and his confidence, is really going to help them out a great deal, as well as play pressure defense right at the point of attack. So he's going to be a big difference, I think, for URI this year. And of course, Jamarcus Lawrence has all all the talent and the experience playing in the Big Ten. And then you've also got a guy we haven't mentioned much is Drisa Traore out of St. John's. He's a big body. He can bang. And I didn't expect it in the UConn game, but he can also step out and make 3-point shots. In fact, he's done that, in the few minutes that he was able to play when he was at St. John's. So you mentioned it at the outset, Scott, that he seemed a lot more balanced, probably more experienced, and I would say probably more talented than what we've seen the previous 2 seasons.
Yeah. And what I'm going to say about Sebastian Thomas is he's the ceiling, and how well he can do is how well we'll do as a team, because his ceiling is if he plays to the way we want him to, then we're going to be getting a really good team out there. What do you think about Sebastian's impact on the team?
Well, exactly. I think he's the guy who's going to run the team. He's going to make it possible for players like House and Jamarcus Lawrence and Estevez not to have to work so hard, for their points. Archie can run an offense where most of it goes through Sebastian and doesn't have to rely as much on one-on-one play by some of those other perimeter players. Although I would have to say that Jaden House, I haven't seen anybody when he gets up ahead of steam really be able to stop him going to the basket. Jamarcus Lawrence can pull up and make shots, and Cam Estevez, may be the most talented offensive player on the team. He can get his shot off. It seems like pretty much any time he wants, particularly that mid-range shot, and he was, statistically, I think the best 3-point shooter on the team between he and Green. I don't remember the exact statistics, but he's an excellent 3-point shooter as well. So Sebastian Thomas, being able to run the offense, being able to get guys where they need to be, and once again, maybe being the lead guy on the defense at the top of the key, he's going to be key. Hopefully, he can stay in the game, and not get himself in foul trouble. But he hasn't shown that proclivity since he was at URI and then at Albany. So expecting a big year from him.
And what are we going to do now that Always Right is redshirting?
He's going to redshirt. He's going to sit. Yeah. There's not a lot of space for Always on this team, particularly since Jamarcus Lawrence has come in and Sebastian Thomas has come in. There's just not a lot of playing time for him. So this is an excellent developmental year for him. Otherwise, why have him waste a year of eligibility and not get the kind of playing time that he needs to be able to develop. So overall, and I'm not sure how Always looks at it, but hey, he sits out a year, he maintains a year of eligibility, and he comes back in, ready to potentially assume that point guard position.
Yeah, I was surprised about that, and I know Jamarcus doesn't want to play point guard, but he seems like the only other option. Maybe Cam, and they're really not point guards, so it's going to be difficult when Bassie needs rest or gets into foul trouble, or God forbid it becomes injured, because we don't have the depth at the point guard. That will be a problem for us, I believe.
Well, it all depends on how things goes for Sebastian. Hopefully, he remains healthy. And like you said, they don't have a backup. They don't have another Lewis Cartwright anywhere on the bench. So if something happens, Sebastian's out, then those other guys who can handle the basketball, House, Estevez, spent some time at the point guard position, and Lawrence, they'll take over and do some work back there and hopefully fill in the gaps if Sebastian isn't there. But I expect that Thomas, as long as he's healthy, he's going to get quite a few minutes on that floor.
And he has the experience to play the pack line because he's been there before. So that's such a hard defensive scheme to learn. So we'll have that. And I think Sebastian is an underrated defensive player. He's a disruptor.
Yes.
You better be careful with him because he's very quick hands. He's just a phenomenal athlete. And he's almost at 30% at the 3-point line and 77% foul shooting. They have a better foul shooting team this year.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised. Javonte Brown
Yes.
finished out the
And where you
preseason.
going?
He was 14 for 17
Yeah.
in the preseason. You know, the Bahamar tournament and against UConn. So he went in and knocked down those free throws. So yeah, that's going to help quite a bit. Sebastian, of course, did a nice job last season, shooting 77%, somewhere around in there.
Yes. Yeah.
But you know, Sebastian took a lot of shots last season. If he's taking a lot of 3-point shots, then their offense isn't working. He's not doing what he needs to do because of the guards. He's the least efficient from the 3-point line. He needs to distribute. He needs to go ahead and penetrate the way he's able to take those open shots when they become available. When the defenses start to sag inside, or when they start to cheat on those other guys who are better perimeter shooters, then those opportunities are going to come. Look, Sebastian had a 40-plus game.
42 points. Another one,
44?
Vermont, he had 34.
Yeah.
He led the league and everything, and then he was a second-team player. But you can say that it's a weaker conference. I watched a lot of videotape, but you can't say that when it comes to foul shooting and 3-point shooting. And those two things, he improved. So wherever he was, and he was at one point, I think he was a top 10 transfer.
He's still a sub 30% 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
And so with guys like Cam Estevez and David Green, having the ability, and Lawrence shooting over 36%, those guys have to be the ones to take the majority of those shots. Now, UConn, they didn't hit them very well. House and David Green, for example.
Yeah.
They didn't shoot it very well, but we know what they're capable of doing. So yeah, if Sebastian is, like I said, if he's jacking up threes, that their offense isn't running the way that they want it to.
Well, the deal was Archie has to let the leash off him, but there has to be a cap. I don't know what that number is. Maybe it's 8 shots a game. But if he's going, you know what he could do when he's on, then just give him the ball. He might have another 42-point night. But for the most part, you do have to cap him and have him concentrate on distributing the ball. And that's where the sky's the limit.
We'll see. We'll see tomorrow, Monday.
Yeah.
Exactly how this team is gonna play with him on the floor in game competition. And my anticipation, I anticipate that he'll be their floor general. He'll play significant minutes at point guard. We'll see other guys like Estevez come in and spell him, maybe Jamarcus Lawrence a little bit. Of course, Jaden House, if he gets it at the top of the key, we know exactly where he's going. Yeah. But he's going to distribute, take his opportunities to score when it's necessary. There may be times when he has to take a game over if things aren't going well and look to provide some offense himself. But I think if he's smart and he's coached well, I think he'll recognize that scoring perhaps isn't his primary function on the floor for this team this year.
Yeah,
he's got guys who can score.
Yeah, Archie must be getting that into it every day. I think he's going to show what type of coach he is this year. And these are his players, too. I think there's a difference in the recruits from this year to those other recruits that were brought in, like Kenny Johnson, were great. They looked great, but if you don't have the right attitude, like Hurley picks out the players, he knows which ones, and he asks certain questions. And I think Archie's doing the same. He's looking for a strong effort from everyone, and I didn't see that last year in many parts of the games. What about you? Did you see?
Here's what I saw last season. I'm not going to talk about any particular player, but I thought that team was just a little bit soft. last season. And when you got guys who appear to be more interested in putting up points as opposed to stopping their opponent from scoring, that's not a good recipe for success. And we saw what happened last season. They could score the basketball.
Yes.
But there was some softness on that team that's not there now. I just said, I wrote down one note after the season, that Archie needs some junkyard dogs out there. He needs some guys who can go get it on the defensive end and have the ability to be able to score as well, but aren't necessarily looking to have that be their main function on the floor. From what I was able to see, against UConn, maybe that's what he has. Hopefully that's the case.
Well, talking about junkyard dog, I interviewed the scout who knows everything about Tyone, and that's what he called him. And you're going to get a guy to come off the bench. He might be the sixth guy, the first guy off the bench. He might start, you don't know, but he's definitely exceeding expectations. And I was told that was the case from a scout last year, but until you see it. So he is doing everything really well. He's not even a bad foul shooter either. He does it all, and it all happened when he went to play with Team Mello or one of those teams.
Yeah,
that's when
Mello.
Yeah. So
I want to make a comment.
Yes, please do. Yeah. Please do.
I was surprised that he was a starter against UConn. That was the first surprise. The second surprise was that he was matched up against Alex Caraban, who's first team preseason All Big East selection. That's asking a lot of your freshman and saying just how much confidence you have that he can be aggressive, that he can give you the defense that you want. That was a tough cover for a freshman. He played well. He had a decent stat line, and it could have been better except for the fact that he got inside and missed a couple of easy layups. Maybe the speed of the game, maybe it will slow down for him. Learning how to get that ball up a little higher on the glass, perhaps. But oh man, I was very, very impressed. First of all, that he started, and second of all, he got the assignment that he did to begin that game and did a credible job.
And he fills the stat sheet with everything. Yep. He's an all-around player, and he plays on both ends, and he loves playing defense. So what do you think you're predicting before they go into the Atlantic 10? I have Chris Desano. I think he was a little bit too conservative. I listened to him on a podcast. He had them at 8-4. And we know their schedule. Their best team is Providence at 6.
He had them at 8-4?
Maybe possibly 9-3 going into the Atlantic 10. Possible, but I just feel they could beat. Charleston is okay. They're 121 as far as ratings. But if this is a really good team and they're confident, look at the football team this year. They're confident. They're winning all the close games. If Rhode Island starts winning the close games, then they may come in there 10-1 or 9-2. I don't know what to think about the Providence game. I'm going a little bit over the top here, but is Providence just too good this year for Rhode Island to hang with them? I mean, they're loaded.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's that's a tough draw, regardless of how you look at it. But preseason, I have URI going anywhere from 10-2 to 7-5.
Yeah,
how's that for a prediction? Right on the head. Because you've got some toss-ups in there, some toss-ups that they might be able to win. I got a couple of games where I'm saying, okay, I'm giving them an L on this one. But they've got some toss-up games in there, and if, like you said, if they play well, can pull out some close ones, they could go 10-2 going into conference season. That's the way I'm looking at it. And if things aren't going, as well as they hope, maybe 7-5. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's the confidence.
So hard to predict.
It is. But Javonte looks very confident out there. David Green can be very confident. And Sebastian, if he's playing the way he has to play and he's leading the team, and everything else. They have so many great parts to this team. Then going into the conference, he predicted a 500 Chris Desano record, 9-9. I thought that was a little bit too conservative too. Finishing the conference, he has him 500, which would bring him roughly around 8 or 9. And I think they could get into 6 or 5. And then once you do that, anything can happen.
This, when you look at the Atlantic 10, there's not a lot of, once you get up beyond, around 10 and then 9, the distance between 9 and 5 is not very much.
Yeah.
It's a game. It may be a couple of games. That may be decided by 5 points or less. So it's hard, but we'll see. One advantage I guess that URI does have is that with the guys coming back as well as the guys who are coming on they've got experience. They got guys who've been around the leagues a little bit. They're not rookies. The only rookie that they have on the squad right now is Zion.
Yeah,
he plays like a man. He doesn't play like a freshman, at least at this point. And who's the other youngest guy? It's Cam Estevez. He's a sophomore. Okay, so
David Fuchs is a pretty old guy for.
David Fuchs.
He's not 19. I'm pretty sure he's in the 21-22 bracket. He's basically a professional when you play over there.
Yeah, he's an experienced man on the floor. So yeah, they got some experience. They know Archie's style. I'm interested to see with maybe some of the athleticism that they have, if this team doesn't take the opportunity to maybe pressure some teams a little bit more than they did last year. I don't know if Archie's a pressure guy. They haven't been able to do it thus far, but they look decidedly better. They were better defensively, getting hands in passing lanes and coming up with steals, and they looked a lot more comfortable. And most teams are pretty happy when they can get out in transition and score buckets in transition.
Part of that interview, but they were talking about Javonte, and the goal is to get him right now to 20 to 25 minutes. That's been his problem, the endurance, and he's in much better shape, but he still has more to work with. So you get to 25 and then maybe 30 mid-season, and then he can play more minutes. But we do have David Fuchs who could come in and play center, because that is the best position for him. We know he's not fast, fleet of foot. We know that one.
No.
But others could take care of that. And the Tyones and the other players who are, if they're locked in defense, which they seem like that's going to be Archie's big thing, then that could be. Now, you had a quote about Javonte, and I really liked it. You said this: Javonte Brown was a space eater, not graceful, but effective, made his presence known, positioned himself to get the ball inside and convert, rebounded the ball well on both the offense and defensive ends, had some putbacks, and blocked a couple of shots. I think that really sums up what he did there pretty well.
Yep, it pretty much does. He's shown he's been the best player for URI thus far in the preseason.
Yeah.
Whether or not that can be sustained, I don't know. But statistically, he's filling up the stat sheet, getting the production that they need from him, basically getting a double-double from him, and getting some rim protection. And he's tough to guard on the inside. He's very long, and when they fouled him, he's gone to the free throw line and he's made them. You can't ask any more.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered it pretty well. This team is a question mark, but I'm very happy about them as far as what they did, and I saw their strategy. And there weren't too many other Atlantic 10 teams that retained the right players. So last year they had 11 newcomers, which was crazy. This year they have less, and they have the experienced people, and the right ones stayed, and the ones that we didn't want to play it. I don't want to be crass about this, but the ones that just didn't fit in the system left, with the exception of a couple maybe that showed some promise. But Archie has to have control on the bench, and he has to have players. And if there was a problem last year, and Archie's proved to everyone he's not going to put up with it. So I think people have to start to realize, if you see a guy who looks really good and he's not playing at all, then there's something going on. I'm not mentioning names, but I like that about Archie. And that's what you have to be like a little. He's showing his Hurley side a little bit. So.
Well, the players who are returning and the coaching staff, they've all got a little something to prove this season. And hopefully they're going into it with, let's say, a few chips on their shoulders and some confidence and the right mindset. Archie talked a lot about building culture. And in the NIL era, you sometimes wonder which comes first, the buck or people who really, really want to compete, for the sake of themselves and their teammates. And that's really what culture is about. So if they're able to instill that, then that gets you, the 2 or 3 wins that come in overtime or by 2 points or what have you, that make a difference between being 10th and being 7th in the league or 6th. Yeah. But it's the attitude. It's the wanting to compete. It's the disposition, if you will, to dominate the opponent. And that has to start on the defensive end. And if they have that kind of mindset and that kind of culture, then this team is going to be successful. And here's the one thing that, look, we're talking UConn, the national champ, 2-time national champions. In the second half, they blitzed URI, and we could not stop them on the offensive end, and particularly from the perimeter, from the 3-point line. They got 3-point shots whenever they felt like it, and they really got to clean that up because everybody loves to shoot the 3 now. And if you can't defend the 3-point line, you're not going to win. And they've got enough on the inside with Brown now, and even and some of the other wing players to be able to play better at mid-range. So they really going to have to expect those guards and perimeter players to get out on that 3-point line and force teams to take the ball inside that 3-point line.
And you saw the weak side where they gave up the backdoor play a couple of times. We can't have that, and that's something Hurley relishes. If you make a mistake, he stays with that mistake. I understand after interviewing a person that was with him for 10 years, Eric Jankowski, that when they lost their Oregon game, it was because, I didn't realize this, they didn't get 1 rebound. They didn't box out, and that one possession was the difference. He used that videotape for the next 2 years. Who knows? He's probably using that now. And that's why he's a great coach, because of the little details that he gets into. And we have to do the same thing, and we can't have things happen again. So that has to be, whatever happened in that backdoor play a couple of times has to be something. And I'm sure Archie knows that, and he's a great coach too. And I wanted to bring up Dr. John Gianni, the former LaSalle coach, was the announcer in the last game of the season. And I had trouble recognizing that Rhode Island had such a advanced offensive team. I think a lot of people still don't know that, but the way he called that game, he was so impressed with our offense. Obviously, our defense we just didn't have the players, the speed. Courtright is a little hobbled, so people go right by him. Jaden needs to do a little better on the defensive side, even though he has the body. But the way he talked about our offense last year, it's very exciting because it shows what we could do. We could become a mini Georgetown and run with 5 players running the court with Javonte's motor and getting down quickly and becoming the running Rams once again. Jaden, and he had one of the most successful runs of any Atlantic 10 coach. And the teams that he beat, you can't beat a Syracuse or Stanford in the NCAA and have Obama send you a tweet if you're not doing a good job. So I think he's going to do really well, and he's already showed me that he could put a team together. So I'm bullish, but you know me, I'm always bullish. So every year I've figured out a way that they could do really well, but I do think people are missing out on this year's team.
Well, we can talk a lot about it. We can make all kinds of predictions, but I always end my comments with, "We shall see."
Yes, you do say that. But Apu, thanks for a great job and great observations that you've had.
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. I appreciate it.